This is Coop's Comedy Corner. Buckle up because it's funny as Coop's Comedy Corner.
Welcome to Coop's Comedy Corner. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and I got to tell you something, people. We have a great show. This gentleman did my Cooper talk in LA. I met him years ago. Wendy Liebman actually recommended him, and I was when he had a movie we're going to talk about, and he's won an Emmy. He's been on TED Talk. He has a fun podcast I've been on called Mazan Movie Club, and he's had a real shitty travel day. You know, that's what they say about comedy is, you know, they don't pay you to perform. They pay you for all the crap you go through. And my guest is Steve Mazan. How you doing, Steve?
Good, Coop. Thanks for having me. And you're exactly right. That's the saying you don't understand when you start comedy is that, yeah, you're getting paid for the travel and the work to get to that show, to learn how to do it, all that kind of crap. But yeah, the show.
So why was today such a bad travel day?
Okay, so I am, I don't know if you can see it out the window there. That is the lovely Caribbean Ocean out the back. So it's hard for me to say it's been a crappy travel day when this is the end of it. But it started last night. I'm joining a cruise here. I'm in Grand Turks and Caicos, one of the islands there. And but it started last night on a red eye in Los Angeles. So I took Los Angeles to Newark, and then Newark to Provinciales, which is the kind of a big city in Turks and Caicos. And there was a delay there, so I missed my flight. And then they didn't know if there was going to be a hotel here. So we're kind of coming in blind. And yeah, just one of those travel days where you're, trying to sleep. You sleep maybe 30 minutes on a red eye. Are you one of those guys? Can you not sleep on a flight?
You know, when I first started dating my now wife, I would fly back from LA once a month to see her, and I would take the red eye, and I could not sleep on it. And I always thought, and if I did sleep on it, it's only like a 5-hour flight, so it's not like I'm getting a full night's sleep. But I can't do it. My wife, she's out. We went to Italy, she was out. Me, I'm drinking the wine, trying to put me to sleep. I can't do it. So you're on a cruise.
I have one of these things. I have one of these things where I think it won't cure your being able to sleep, but it'll solve another problem. I always say to someone, because there's always people who are like, I can't sleep on a flight. And I always say, you should be a pilot. That way we solve that. Then you're in good hands, at least. That guy's not falling asleep.
So where's your cruise going to for tomorrow, and how long will it be? And I always wonder, how many shows do you do a week on these cruises?
Yeah, so that's all good questions. I was just talking about that. There's another comic that's joining with me. And so a lot of times you'll do the whole cruise. So in that case, you'd leave out of someone like the ship that we're joining is probably left out of Miami, and it's been at sea for a couple days, and we're going to join in the middle. And so what we'll do is we'll do the back 3 days, the last 3 days of the cruise. Some other comics that were already there, they'll get off tomorrow. We'll do the back 3 days, and then we'll do the front 3 days of the next cruise. So you kind of get 2 cruises, but the people who are on the cruise get to see 4 different comics instead of just 2 for over the week. So it looks like for this one, usually do 5 shows. It looks like this one we're going to do 6 shows over 3 days. So it'll be 6 on the back end of this cruise, and then 6 again at the beginning of the next one. So yeah, the clubs on this is where I'm doing Carnival. They have comedy clubs on the ship. So the room seats, it feels like a real comedy club. Seats like 300 people, that kind of thing. So, you can imagine they have, 3,500 people on board. They can't all fit in on there at the same time. So they have multiple shows so that people can come in and see it.
Now, do you have to do a different act every night? Like when you go through, and I know some cruises you have to do like a 45-minute clean show or a 45-minute dirty show. What is yours like? Okay, on Carnival, do you have to do like 3, 30, or 40-minute sets during the week? Because that means you have to have a lot of damn material.
Right. Yeah, that's what it ends up being. They usually the base criteria is that having 45 minutes clean and then 45 minutes for adult. You're a comedian as well. It's usually easier if you can master the clean stuff. It's relatively easy to dirty it up. I'm relatively a clean comedian, but I've done enough bar shows that I can throw in a couple dick jokes or a couple swearing into a joke that's otherwise clean to make it feel kind of adult. But yeah, I always think that it becomes a thing. They ask you to do 3 or 4 different shows, sometimes 5 different shows, depending on how long the week is or how long the cruise is, where it would be 5 different shows. I always start betting on the crowd themselves. I'm always like, very seldom people will come back to a comedy club on the same night. So if you have 2 or 3 shows, on those nights, I'm always like, well, I can do the same show tonight, because I don't think those people are going to come back after they just saw that show. They're not going to come back an hour later and see the show. So I can repeat that one. But then the next night, I'll switch it up and do a completely new show kind of thing. And then, like you said, there's certain ones that are rated, like it's PG, that's going to be all ages. There's going to be some kids in the audience. Then you got to, just make sure you're catering to that audience.
So when I gave the introduction, I said you were an Emmy winner. And I know you wrote for Ellen. And, we just found out that we found out she was a shithead. I was on the show twice. I met her once. I played one of Huey Lewis's news. And the other time I played Matt Lauer's forehead. But I met her, but she wrote, what I'm talking about. So what was it like working with her? Give me she's done. She's out of the business pretty much. Was it as bad as people say? And you were there in the beginning, or when did you start writing?
I was kind of in the middle. They had already had gone through. There was a whole team of like writers and stuff that kind of started with her, and at the beginning, and then there was the writer's strike. I guess that was 2008, the first big one, and then they kind of cleaned house. I guess from what I heard in the beginning, before I was there, it was Ellen. She's the host. The writers were considered up there with her, and then even with the writers were the executive producers, but they were on it, and then Ellen. So the writers could go directly to Ellen. And then I guess after the writer's strike, it became much more vertical, where it was Ellen, executive producer, then the writer. And the writers, everything had to go through the executive producers. In fact, when I was the only stand-up comedian on the writing staff. All the others were just straight writers. So I very often would write a joke for the monologue or something like that. And then the head writer would change it. And then we'd take it to the executive producers. They would change it. And then we'd take it to Ellen. And Ellen, without knowing how I wrote it, would change it back to that first way it was, like the original way. I always say this, you know this about me, and we'll probably end up talking about it. I'm a big David Letterman fan. He was my guy. I loved him, watched him. I'm probably the same like you. There was our parents' generation. It was Johnny Carson. I love Johnny Carson as well. But all of a sudden, at some point, there was this guy on after Johnny who was a little hipper. My parents really didn't get his humor. It made me like him more. But one of the other things about Letterman that I liked that I didn't see before that is he was kind of a little ornery. You wouldn't call him a nice guy. You could tell if you watched him a lot, if he liked the guest or not. You could tell if he was not enjoying an interview. He was very vocal about, the network he was on. No one would just be like, David Letterman's a nice guy. So I think the problem with Ellen, this is where I'm using the analogy to go the other way, is Ellen's whole brand became, she's the queen of nice. Now this is the crazy thing. If you remember even further back, Ellen had the same producers as Rosie O'Donnell did. If you remember, Rosie O'Donnell used to have a daytime show in the early 2000s. And her nickname was the Queen of Nice as well. No one would call Rosie O'Donnell nice today. Whatever you feel about her, you might agree with everything she says, but you still wouldn't call her the Queen of Nice. But that was her nickname when she had her show, because that was the brand of the show. And so same thing, Ellen comes in, and whether it fits or not, it becomes her brand, and she gives away prizes, and she's dancing and all that kind of thing. So I think then people meet her or they work with her, and just no one is that nice, that they're giving you cars and TVs and all this kind of stuff all the time. Whereas if you meet Letterman, you're expecting him to be a jerk. You wouldn't be surprised if he's a little ornery. Whereas you're expecting Ellen to be nice, and she's not going to live up to that because no one can. And so it just seems like that. I'll give you my favorite example of this. And Jimmy Fallon has since fallen into the same kind of thing, I think. Very often, you would work directly with Ellen. This was the great thing. If you were writing the monologue, you would meet with her 3 or 4 times that day, working on the monologue, and she'd be changing all the time. She's one of the funniest people ever. She's got a great quick wit, but she knew how she wanted things. So very often the show would be starting, the music would be going already, and she would say, or take her final look at the monologue and be like, "Oh, I want you to change this." So as you know, she's walking to the stage, you have to go change that on the computer, get into the teleprompter before she steps out on that stage. So it's your heart's like boom, 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 like, oh my God, am I going to make this happen? Right. So it's a lot of pressure. A couple times, that happened to me a bunch of times. A couple times it happened to these other writers, and they cried. And then the story became, did you see Ellen made Wendy cry? And I was like, well, I don't know if Ellen made Wendy cry. The situation made Wendy cry. I don't think Ellen wasn't yelling. She wasn't saying you screwed this up, fix it, blah, blah, blah. She was saying, this is how I want it. And in the moment, it's pressure filled. You're making TV. There's millions of dollars at stake. There's a lot of things going on. So it sounds like everything I'm saying is defending Ellen. And at some level I am. At another level, she's like Oprah at some level, where she's just a little out of touch. How many other people can understand Ellen's life? That maybe Oprah is the only other person, that she's that rich. She really isn't, I remember people saying, well, even if she wasn't mean, she should have known some of the bad stuff that was going on behind doors, which there was some stuff that with the executive producers and the writer and the head writer of the show who got in trouble. And people were like, well, she should have known about that. Well, I don't know if Steve Jobs knew what the janitor was doing at Apple when he was in charge, So the biggest thing I saw is Ellen was not as nice as she was on TV, and maybe she was out of touch. That's how I would explain it.
Well, now, but you also posted something on Facebook. I want to touch on how you said when you started with Ellen, you were the only male writer, I believe.
There was another male writer. I was the only male writer who also did stand-up comedy. There was one female writer who dabbled, but she never made her living as a stand-up comic, but she did some stand-up. But yeah, it was very women.
You said they called you in the office, or they wanted to look at you or something when you first met her.
Yeah, I mean, she made me do a spin kind of thing. Yes. But again, I thought it was very funny. It was, I think she told me, I walked in, she did a spin, and then she's like, I don't like it. Go stand behind that tree. There was like a little tree in the corner, and it was it was a joke. It was one of those things, I think both as men, you and I, and then as comedians, we probably let things roll off our back, or, just being men. Part of our fun that we have of being men is just giving people crap, giving each other crap. My wife would often see me, poking fun with my friends, and she's like, I can't believe they were saying that stuff to you. And I was like, oh, I loved it. It was very fun. I like the teasing. And so Ellen had that. So another person might've been like, oh my God, the first day I walked in, she had me spin around and everyone looked at me, and it's like, no, I knew she was joking, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's that kind of thing. Like I said, I know Jimmy Fallon has kind of fallen into that same thing, where people have on his writing staff have said, oh, he's very demanding and he's not as nice as he is on TV. And, it's like, okay, yeah, that's his persona.
Well, I think you have to be demanding because your name's attached to it. I'm not going to have a shitty guest on any of my shows. When I put a comedy show together, I'm going to make sure the acts are strong, because
100%.
bottom line is it's saying Cooper's on it. And I understand. And you're right. It's at such a magnitude, and you have to feel the pressure just because, everyone wants to get your job, especially now with social media.
Yes.
People just fuck with you. They just put stuff out like, oh, he's an, oh, I saw him at a bar. Oh, Jimmy Fallon was drunk. And I'll be honest, I think Jimmy Fallon should have a sketch show, because I think he's talented. He's got talent.
Yes.
His impressions are amazing.
Yes.
He can dance. He can sing. I just think he's a shitty interviewer. And I have no problem saying that because he becomes like a fanboy. But if he had like a Carol Burnett show, it would blow up because people want to see sketch again. And he's so good at that. And he has his friends that would come in and do that stuff. But I think, as you said earlier, we're both Letterman guys. Okay. Hey, we saw the, jumping Velcro and all that. Whatever you're doing, what Alan's doing, Letterman did. I mean, that's the thing. Letterman was that, just cutting edge for us and just something different. And I think that's, but it has to be a lot of pressure though when you're at that position.
100%. And that's what I mean. That's why I kind of understand. Like I said, I don't want to make any excuses for her. Anyone who has a story of this is how it, okay, yeah, you have that story. But again, she's the one that, has to walk out no matter, what I screw up on a thing. She's the one that's got to go out there and say it, stand behind it and deliver with all that pressure. So, I give her some slack on that front,
So comedy, okay, I want to know when did you start comedy? And I want you to, as you start this, think in mind that we're going to get to you talking about your documentary, Dying to Do Letterman. We're talking about you on David's show, Getting on the Letterman, which is, and then your TED Talks. But when did you decide to start comedy? Where are you out of as a comic? Where'd you start at?
So I've got a tale of three cities. Kind of, I'm a little ahead of Dickens here. I grew up in Chicago, but I didn't start comedy till I moved to San Francisco. I was in the Navy for a few years right after high school. I was on a submarine. I'm not sure if I've told you that story before. Lived on a submarine for 4 years. And then when I got out, I went to college.
I'm going to interrupt you. I want to hear about living on a sub because how often do you come up? And is it just like crazy when you see like all of a sudden you see like, holy shit, there's people around? I mean, what is it like living on a sub?
Well, again, you only got to see it, if they let you look at Periscope, was the only time you got to see light once you're out there, once you left port. And there were, most of the guys on the boat didn't even work in a space where they could use the Periscope. So they didn't get to see it. I luckily had like a job that I could move throughout the boat. The longest we ever stayed out, we'd be waiting. I was out of Norfolk, Virginia at the time. We were gone from Norfolk for 6 months one time, but the longest we stayed underwater was 7 weeks. And so almost as much as seeing the light, getting fresh air in there. I mean, we made our own, oxygen and, you kind of bring in some fresh air, but when you open those hatches and you can feel real fresh air and stick your head out, I mean, that was as exciting as, like you said, seeing other people and we had some of the funner times where it would be down in a place like this in the Caribbean, and they would just surface and they'd call swim call. And we'd put a guy up with a sail, if you can picture, a submarine has the kind of fin, and there'd be a guy up there with an M16 doing shark watch, but everyone else got to jump off the side of the sub and swim around in the ocean for, a couple hours. And it was fun. It was, especially being, 18, 19, 20-year-old kid at the time, looking back now, I mean, I knew quickly I wasn't a military guy, for life. But I look back on it romantically now that I got to do this, and of course the special part of being a submariner. It's funny. I did a corporate event one time. They a group of veterans who had all been on submarines did a convention, and they asked me to come and do comedy. And I said Submariner, and they got mad, and then they didn't even believe that I was on a submarine. They're like, "No, it's Submariner." And I was like, well, I say Submariner. They're like, no, there's no Submariner. I was like, well, everyone where I was, we said Submariner, and I think there was a generational thing too, because there was a comic book superhero called the Submariner. They're like, yeah, but it's a submarine. Why would it be a submarine? I was like, well, it's not the Seattle Mariners either. Right. Things change when you add letters.
You're a sub guy. And then you end up in San Francisco. So is that when you start comedy? San Fran?
That's when I start comedy. So I get out of subs. I go to college back in the Midwest, and then I move out to San Francisco. And when I was going a little reverse, when I was 12 years old, we got cable. This is so silly, probably to the younger generation that doesn't know a time when there was only 3 channels, maybe 4 if you had some good antennas and you lived near a city. You could get like a UHF channel as well. But we got cable, and I thought, Steve, I remember thinking when my mom told me we had cable, and the cable guy came in and sold it, I was like, "Are we rich? Do we have money?" I didn't realize we had it was like when we got a VHS, I was like, "Oh my God, we can go rent movies and stuff." It's hard to explain to some, this generation that at the touch of a button can see any movie they want. How special it was at that time to be able to go to a store or just turn your TV on and you'd get a movie that had no commercials and stuff. So anyways, we get cable the very first night. The very first thing on HBO was, it was near Christmas, was Rich Little's A Christmas Carol. And so it's a telling of Dickens' A Christmas Carol, and Rich Little plays all the roles. Nixon was, I think, Scrooge, and Bob Hope was Bob Cratchit, all these characters. So my mom and I watched that together, and then she worked in a factory. After that, she goes, "Okay, I'm going to bed," and she goes to bed. I think it was even a school night, but I stayed up, or else I pretended to go to bed and I came back out. And Richard Pryor Live, the concert is called Richard Pryor Live, was on right after the Rich Little thing. Now, I had seen comedians on probably Letterman even at that point, but definitely Johnny Carson. But I didn't know it was any more than coming out and telling 5 minutes of jokes. I thought that's all it was. I didn't realize that that you could fill in this case, the Long Beach Civic Center, full of 5,000 people, and they would listen to you for an hour and a half, talk about your life and your family. And I didn't realize it was a living that you could make it, this thing. So when I saw that special, which I still say is the greatest special of all time, I was like, I want to do that. Me as a silly, little 12-year-old white kid who wanted to be Richard Pryor. Now, even, fast forward many years later, there's nothing in my act that's Richard Pryor, except, I would say Richard Pryor at some level is a very storyteller, observational comic. It just he has such an edge to him. It feels like something much different. But that's when I wanted to do it. Now, so 12 years old, it took another 17 years to get the cojones to attempt it. And so I was in San Francisco. My sister was living out there, and they moved back to the Midwest. And so I was kind of out there by myself. And I remember hearing that San Francisco kind of had a famous comedy scene. And so I was on this kind of precipice of, do I move back to the Midwest where my family is, or I'm out here alone? Maybe I should try this thing that for a decade plus I've always said I wanted to try. And so I looked up open mics in San Francisco, and I jumped out onto the scene, and it ended up being an amazing scene. And that's kind of where I started. Spent 6 years there learning the craft before I moved down to Los Angeles.
Now, when you were in those 6 years, were you starting to get work? And who was up there then? Was Marin up there? Who was your guys? I know because Marin and Blanca Pash, I know, was living out there.
Patch, Patton Oswalt,
yeah, they all were.
Would come through a bunch. Robin Williams was. You would be doing an open mic sometimes, a terrible open mic somewhere, and you'd be dying in front of 6 people, not even paying attention. People turning their backs on you, drinking their beer, like, shut this guy up. And you'd look through the crowd, and at the back would be Robin Williams staring there, and he'd be like weighing the room, like, do I want to do this or not? You'd see guys like that would come through. Al Madrigal, who's relatively hot right now. W. Kamau Bell, who has the show on CNN. Lots of guys. I've tried to get Jake Johansson, obviously. Dana Gould, who's extremely funny, is executive producer of Simpsons forever. All these guys were kind of on the scene, coming and going. At that time, I think the big guys in the city who lived there and were just on the scene versus popping in and coming in and out were a guy named Jim Short, who just passed away this past year. And then Arj Barker, who is really big in Australia, and he's been on, if you know Flight of the Conchords, you've probably seen him on that. Super funny. They were kind of the big guys that lived in the city that felt like, okay, these guys are the masters of stand-up, but they haven't blown up yet, kind of thing.
So you moved to LA. Now, you moved to LA, and when are you working stand-up when you find out you have cancer? And then
Yeah.
and so what kind Take me through that, because then you end up doing the documentary, and I saw it. Very good.
Oh, thank you.
So what was that? What happened? Give me your story.
Okay, so I'm about 6 years in. Then I'm down in LA for maybe a year or so. I'm making a living. I'm touring the country, featuring, headlining some places, but making a living doing comedy, road comic, traveling around. And I always, thought Letterman was my guy. That was my dream when I got into comedy. Someday I'll be on the Letterman show. And I was coming home from a gig at the Ontario Improv with another comedian, Gary Cannon, who you may have had on the show before.
Gary.
He does for his warm-up
that's right,
stuff.
Gary. You know what? Gary did Cooper Talk. I love Gary, but I always love him. He's the creepiest motherfucker ever. I love him, man. He is creepy. He's a sweet.
Yeah.
He's so sweet. But he told me one time, I don't know if it was his old girlfriend or wherever. I don't know if he's married. I don't know. But he was like even saying her parents think he's creepy.
Yeah, his own girlfriend is like, that's too creepy. Yes, 100%. Yeah. He's my best buddy, and he knows he would own the creepiness. He outdoes himself every time. When you think he couldn't get creepier, he outdoes it. But yeah, him and I were coming back from a gig, and I started just having some pains, and they eventually took me to the hospital. Thought it was an ectomy, that I had ruptured my appendix. But when I woke up, there was an oncologist there, and they said, hey, when we were in there, your appendix ended up being fine. We took it out, but you've got tumors all over your liver. We're going to run tests over the next month or so. They traced it back to my intestines. It was stage 4 cancer. It had spread. It was metastasizing, and it was called neuroendocrine carcinoid tumors. And the worst case scenario was for the stuff on my liver, there was no cure for, and was 5 years to live. So I had to all of a sudden ask myself, I'm in my early 30s there, if you really own, I'm not a worst case scenario guy, but if you only got 5 years, how do you want to spend that? And obviously career wise, comedy wise, one of the things I always thought would happen was getting on a Letterman show. But now I was like, well, what if I don't have enough time? So I need to spend these 5 years making that happen. So I started a project. This is again, almost like talking about an era before cable, much more recent. This is an era before YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, all these things that I might have done at that point. I just started a project called Dying to Do Letterman, a silly title. And it was a website, and people could see my comedy. And when I did shows live, I would tell them about it as well. And I said, if you think I'm funny, if you don't think I'm funny, don't worry about it. Don't say anything. But if you think I'm funny enough, here's the link to the David Letterman show. Tell them about me and that they should give me an audition. And so that's kind of how it started. And then you had mentioned the documentary. A couple filmmakers out of UCLA had just graduated at the same time. It's a husband and wife team. They heard about the project, and they said, hey, we want to document this. So they started kind of filming all the parts of it, of me chasing this dream over what was supposedly going to be at one point it was, I'm going to give myself a year to get on Letterman. I realize now how impossible that was, to go from the Letterman people don't know about you to being on the show kind of thing. Spoiler alert, it took 5 years, almost the whole worst case scenario of the diagnosis. But eventually, I made it onto the show.
Now, did you have just one audition? I know you had told me before years ago. I remember you had said that the producers may have thought it was sort of like you were like a Make-A-Wish type guy. You weren't an actual comp. You were just someone who said, oh, this is what I want to do. So how did you overcome that? I mean, how did you get to get the Letterman people to recognize you? Because there's tons of comics. And I think there was a guy in LA last year or 2 years ago who made up that he had cancer. He made it up. I forget. I just saw a post about it. And I was like, holy shit. I'm like, that guy wasn't.
I know.
He got all this, he got a special, and it was all bullshit. But so how did you end up? What was your course to getting to actually get recognized by Letterman, to actually know that you're a legit working comic? What did you do?
Yeah, so that was it. That was it was proving to them. You imagine, here we are. It's easy to say now here. This was at that time 2005 and 6. So, here I am, 18, 19 years later. I know I have lived and I'm fine. But at that point, it was a very, I have doctors, a panel of doctors at UCLA saying 5 years, was the worst case. Maybe you could live 10 with this. It was a rare kind of cancer that they didn't know a lot about at that point. So, they're saying you got to be, prep for this. So that's what I started from. And so I think there's this catchy name, Dying to Do Letterman, but it's dying. I am, dying. I've got this diagnosis, but it's a play on words that I'm also a comedian I am dying to do Letterman before I get the diagnosis. I want to do, that's the whole idea. But to the point you're bringing up, when the Letterman people hear about it, they think it's that. They don't think, oh, does this guy make a living doing comedy? Is he any good? They just think, oh, this is kind of a Make-A-Wish thing. So pretty quickly, first of all, I get just some emails just saying, stop, it's not going to happen, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually, if you know the show, after I think this was probably, my time frame might be a little off, after about 1.5 or 2 years, I got a letter in the mail. And it says The Late Show with David Letterman, New York, New York. I was like, ooh, what's this? And I should have known, because email was already in fashion at this point. And the phones worked and we all had cell phones. So why am I getting a mail? It was a legal letter, and it was Barbara Holliday, the executive producer. And it says, I could still see it, reading it. You will not be on the show. This will not happen. Cease and desist. And, pretty heartbreaking to get it, but also, as I said, I'm not a give up guy. So I just doubled down, like, all right, they think it is this thing. I'm going to prove to them that not only am I a working comic, I'm a real comic. They should take this seriously, but I'm good enough to be on the show. I'm as good as, I'm maybe not Jake Johansson, a guy that's been on 40 times, but whoever their new comic is that they're bringing, I'm as good as that guy, and they should look at me. So it was proving that. And so eventually, slowly over another couple of years, I was able to, through other people, Tom Sawyer, one of the owners of a club in San Francisco who had connections to the booker, reached out on my behalf and said, hey, no, this isn't a poor me thing. This guy's a really good comic. He might not have the time to go the normal route. Take a peek at him. And sure enough, the booker finally took a look at me and one of my videos and said, hey, yeah, there's some really good stuff in here, but it's not ready yet. Keep sending me stuff. So then it became a process, the normal process. I was kind of like, had my toe in the door, and I just had to figure out what's the right set to get to be on the show. And that ended up taking, from that point, another 2.5, 3 years. And there was kind of some setbacks in there where I thought I was getting close. Then I felt I was getting further away. And then I felt like it wasn't going to happen at all again. And then just one day, you know this, there's so many times in comedy, you have a joke you're not even sure about. I might tell this tonight. And then you half tell it, and the audience just goes nuts about it or something. So in that vein, I was sending him these 5-minute sets, and this time we're sending them on DVDs. I would mail them off to the guy when I had a 5 minutes I thought he'd like. I was so frustrated that it felt like I was getting further away. He wasn't liking anything I sent him. That one time I had taped like a 12-minute set at a club. And it was 5 minutes that I thought he'd like from everything he told me he would like. And then the next 7 minutes, I would usually chopped off because it was stuff he had said in the past he didn't like. There were some characters in it. It was one long joke, like a long 7-minute bit. And I just didn't edit it. I just was like, he'll watch the first 5 minutes and turn it off. I'm not going to go through the trouble of putting it in the DVD drive and edit it and then copy a new one and blah, blah, blah. I just sent him that whole 12 minutes. And he called me up. I remember I was on the East Coast, and I thought, it was the usual call. He'd call after he saw something and be like, yeah, that's not the. And he called and he said, hey, I watched that first 5 minutes. Nothing in there. And I was disappointed. He's like, but that next 7, that Hotel Key thing, that's the bit. And I was like, what? It was a fluke that I sent it to him. And he's like, no, that's the bit. He's like, we're going to put that on TV. And I mean, I was ecstatic. I could still, even telling you the story now, I could feel the goosebumps. And I happened to be with some other comics at the time, and they could see like, uh-oh, something's happening. He's really, he must be getting the show. Because, I had showed them at Abril, but I was like, yeah, he's going to tell me he didn't like it. And that's how it started. But then he's like, nope, you're going to be on. And so then it was a week later. So, one of the fun things about that of knowing you're going to be on a late show, late night TV, is then you get to go practice that set at all the clubs. It's one of the nice things in comedy, like the camaraderie starts. You can go to any club almost and be like, hey, next Tuesday, I'm taping Letterman. Can I run through the set here tonight? And whoever, no matter what, they'll be like, yep, come on in. Or, it's the Mark Maron show tonight, but he'll let you do.
Now you froze.
Ooh, I'm back. Am I back? I don't know if I got it. I probably practiced it 30 times that week. Yeah.
Okay, so now go back to the documentary.
Yeah.
It shows you doing Letterman, so you did it. I mean, you wouldn't stay dying to do Letterman and not have you do Letterman because people go, what the hell is this? So
the filmmakers always said there were two options. either you do Letterman or you die. That's our ending.
Right. So what was the reaction to people seeing the documentary? Because it is a very uplifting story. And and you always hear about the tragedy of comedy. You always hear about the bad things, the such and such, OD'd or such and such,
yes,
killed in a car accident. You never hear about the good. And I always sit there and go, there's some guys on Facebook, and I call them the coffee shop comics. Nothing against them, but they're always like, we're on the grind. I'm like, dude, you make no money, and that's great. You want to do it. But they're always like, be nice to a comic because we're so sad.
Right.
Well, I'll be honest. A lot of comics I know aren't sad. I think a lot of times people just sit there and they go, they want the idea of being a comic, and and being like, oh, I'm dark and I'm edgy. And it's like, yeah, but you're not funny, and that's the thing. Like this, you don't look at the uplifting side. So what was the reaction? I mean, what was the reaction to you with this documentary? Were people? I mean, I'm sure people. I mean, you end up doing a TED Talk and all that, but what was the people's reaction to your documentary?
Same thing. I remember, we had this. I want to give a lot of credit to the filmmakers themselves, because we've all read a book before where you love the book and then they make it a movie and it's like, the movie wasn't good. It didn't tell the story right. The filmmakers do a great job of what they include and show, and so it shows this inspiring. Where I've seen the movie so many times on film festivals and stuff we took it to, that I would get caught up. I was like, does this guy make it? I hope he makes it. I forget it's me sometimes because they're such good storytellers. But you're right. I don't know if you remember. I just want to go backwards because you make such a great point about that. I think comedy, we're so lucky to do comedy, right? I think that maybe that's we feel guilty. So these comics think they have to make it sound awful and terrible and depressing because we're so lucky. There's a friend of mine, Cash Levy. He always says our worst night of comedy is someone else's greatest night of their life. To get up in front of a crowd of people and make them laugh. Even if you had a relatively bad set, someone else would have been like that. They'd be telling people for years about that night. So I think there's this angle that these, the coffee guys you're talking about, maybe they feel guilty and they have to make it sound like it's awful. But there was that show on Showtime about the Comedy Store. I can't remember what it's called.
I'm dying up here.
Yes, even the name, right? I guess I use dying as well, so I can't throrow it all on that.
Okay, but real quick, I'm going to interrupt you right there. I interviewed the guy who wrote the book that was based on, but they were nothing. It wasn't really anything to do with the same. And I think in that one, in the dying up here, and I enjoyed it, but they did have like the comic was just this dark, and it was just weird, man. It's like yours. I mean, yours is uplifting. So
yeah.
So how are people reacting to yours? When were people coming up to you and saying thank you, or I have cancer, or were you a role model suddenly? What happened?
I mean, it's hard to say role model, but I think I did inspire some people just to do this thing that to maybe pick up something that you again more time. I'm still here. I lived well past the worst case scenario and even their best case scenario at that time. I'm still here. I'm very lucky. But I have friends who've died in car accidents, who've died from other diseases in that time, who were very healthy when I met them. So you just never know when your time might be up. It's all very precarious. So I think the movie, and then we did a book as well with the Chicken Soup for the Soul People. I think the story inspired people to maybe just think about these things that you're saying a lot of times, like someday I might do this. And to just pick it up and start doing it now, whether it works out or not, just do it so that you move it, and then you either do it or you fail at it, and then you can move on to the next thing. But at least you're moving towards it versus saying, like I was before the diagnosis, like, yeah, someday the Letterman or people will hear about me. You go out and make it happen, chase it instead of wait for it. And so there were a lot of people that, once they saw the movie, I think had that angle. They would come up and they'd be like, you know what, I saw your movie and I'm writing my book now, or I always wanted to go to Africa. I'm going to do that, that kind of thing. And we even had these buttons that we'd share at the film festivals, and it said, I'm dying to, and it'd be blank. I'm dying to be on Cooper Talk, that kind of thing, and they would write in what they were dying to do. So I think it made people kind of think about that. What's the thing in your life that you're dying to do that you might be waiting to do?
See, I'm a sick person. If the same thing happened to me, I would have said, I told someone, just go out and do it. And they said they were dying to climb Mount Everest, and they died 2 days later. I mean, I just think it's just my sense of humor. But so now tell me how, okay. So through all that, how did you end up doing TED Talks? Because everyone, here's my thing about motivational speakers. There are some very good ones, but there are some I see on LinkedIn, and it's all smoke and mirrors. I swear, I see this one woman. She sits there and she angles the camera. She knows there's no one in the crowd because she didn't hear anything, but she wants to make like she's speaking about it. Angles the camera, and you never see the crowd pan. You just see her speaking, and they come out and they walk out with their bright colors, like and they talk like these fucking car subs, like you can do this, and I think it hurts motivational speakers at times. But how did you get involved with the TED Talks?
Well, it's so funny. All right, to your point, I'm with you. One of I mentioned him already. My buddy Cash Levy, he has a joke where he says, he's like, "Is it a bad person that I'm happy when bad things happen to motivational speakers?" And I feel that same way. I'm turned off by this kind of motivation, this fake thing of, convincing people that you've done things. There's the guy who, there's the military guy who's like, you got to make your bed every single morning. That's what successful people do. It's like, oh my God, I couldn't be rooting against you more, right? You start with root your bed. I'm that way. My TED Talk. Well, let me go backwards a little. I didn't even know what a TED Talk was, but they were doing a TED event up in the Bay Area where we premiered the movie because I was from that comedy scene, and someone saw it, like you're saying, and they were inspired, and they said, "Would you come and be part of our TED event?" And so I didn't know what it was, and I had to learn all about it. And so, it's tech, I think education and design. And so, but I kind of just, shared my story. But it's going to sound like I'm patting myself on the back, but it's only because of what we just talked about. I'm the same way. I do not like motivational speakers. I don't buy into the schmaltz of it. So mine is telling the story, but making fun of a motivational speaker. In fact, it starts with all these motivational quotes that you hear all the time that these guys throw out. And so that was my idea, like to make it funny and just be like, hey, in the end, it's the only thing is putting the feet on the ground and going and chasing the thing you want, that you're going to be a better person whether you make it or not. It's not the goal. It's the process of doing it. I sound like Joel Embiid, your Philadelphia guy here with the process, but it's not anti-motivation, but it's just a more straightforward way versus something of like, I figured this out and here you can too, kind of thing.
Well, they always sound like they're talking down to you. They're like saying, you're an idiot. Just follow what I do. I love it on LinkedIn when people go, what I've learned. I don't give a shit what I've learned. I said, I said, and then they're like, your takeaways, my takeaways, you don't know me. How do you know my takeaways? It's just this narcissistic bullshit. And then people start doing the liking. I saw one lady, and this is funny because, you need social media followings that, in the industry. But this person added me on LinkedIn. And then I went to see their Facebook page, and she's sitting there in front of like a sports car, like making some stupid comment, and
Right.
she has a million followers on Facebook, but all her posts have 8 likes. They have 8. So how do you have a million people and 8 likes? I mean, I do those stupid album reviews sometimes, and some of them have got like 900 likes.
Of course, yes.
But I just laugh. It's like, it's that thing. It's like, it's such bullshit. And I don't get it. It's like, I mean, I guess because we're comics, because when you're a comedian, you see through the bullshit. But I always think, people like, how do you not see this person's full of shit? Like, I don't get it.
Well, and again, I even to myself, I'm a comic. So I understood not just the Letterman people, but other comics who at that time, when I was chasing that Letterman dream, who were like, wait a second. Like you said, you're skeptical as comedians. That's who we are. I knew I've run into people since in years since. They're like, hey, I thought you were dead. I thought you were dying. Well, I'm like, I'm sorry. It didn't happen, but I get it. I'm a comedian. I would have asked that question. Like, hey, what's going on? But yes, to your point, there was this guy, and I apologize because you've had so many guests, and I love the array of guests and subjects you have on. But Kyle Cease, do you know Kyle Cease?
I know who he is. I know he was a comedy teacher or something.
Yes, that's where I'm going.
Real religious? Was he real religious?
A thing, I think he might have been, maybe even Mormon or something. But he started a thing where it was a comedy class, and when he was selling it, just as like you're saying, it was this angle of this almost cult leader kind of thing. You could do what I do, and you're going to make you get your sitcom. I'll help you get your sitcom, and you'll be making millions of dollars. And I remember the great comic Jimmy Dore called him. I was like, "Where's your sitcom? Where's your $1 million? How can you be teaching other people do this if you don't have it? Your talent isn't the sitcom or comedy." Your talent is tricking people into thinking that you could do this, and you can't. I think that's what you and I are talking about, that we don't like about this motivational speaker kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's bullshit. Now, you mentioned my other podcast, Cooper Talk. Well, you also have a podcast called the Mazan Movie Club, which we talked about. It's so funny. We talked about 16 Candles. And like a few months later, I actually interviewed Getty Watanabe, and we talked about. I interviewed him, and I asked him, because me and you had talked about your wife. Your wife was a co-host. Yeah. Yep. And I asked him, I said, I had a roommate in college who was from Hong Kong, and we called him the Donger. And he said, the funny thing is, he told me people who were from Asia weren't offended as much as people from America, but years later. But we talked about that movie. You recently, I think you had was it House of Games? No, with was it House of Games? You had a Mammoth movie on recently, I think.
Yeah, we just did House of Games with Joe Mantegna and Lindsay Krause. Yep.
So when did you decide to do a podcast? And then tell the people what your podcast is about. And then does your wife co-host all of them?
She does. Well, not all of them, but a big chunk of them. She chimes in or gives me her thoughts. My mom chimes with a critique each week. She's old. She calls herself the Irish critic. So she gives a little, 5-minute review of it from her standpoint. But I imagine I don't know the origin story for you on your podcast, but I imagine it's the same thing. I wanted to do a podcast. I wanted to have something when people like me at comedy show that I could give them. If I'm not going to be back for a year, we can somehow stay in touch. There's something they can enjoy me with still. And so I had some ideas, and then I just realized, you know what? 99% of the time, no matter what I'm talking about, if you and I just went and had dinner with no criteria whatsoever, half of it would be talking about movies, or we would be talking about one thing and it would steer towards movies, or half of the analogies we would use for talking about love would be things from movies or politics and movies. It always come back to movies. So I was like, oh, well, this is what I should do. And my mom, like who I said is the Irish critic on the show, she was in a book club. And I was like, oh, well, why don't I just flip that and we'll do it a movie club? And we just watch a movie each week. I'll pick a movie that's supposedly one of the great movies of all time. We'll watch it. People will share online their thoughts. I'll share those thoughts on the podcast, and then I'll have a guest, and my mom will chime in, my wife, if she's around, and we'll just talk like you would about a book club and get everyone's thoughts on it. So that's it. and we've done 370 movies now, and it's fun seeing how we all see the same thing, but we all see it differently. You know what I mean? Like, and that whatever movie you think is the great, I forget. I always ask everyone favorite movie and best movie of all time if they're different. But there's people who you would tell me your favorite movie and best movie, and they would tell me why those are awful. But we're seeing the same movie, you know?
Well, if you ever do Diner, I'm gonna come on for that, because Diner is a great movie. Now, another thing though about your podcast is you do the adult film titles. Which, whenever you do that though, here's what it is. There's like, I used to screw around and jump the gun just to piss you off. And I go, I would just say,
I love it. I only know this because, again, so you post a lot as well. You post your album covers or today's the day, and I love it. But we're comedians, so just the same way I said, there's someone who's going to come up to me and say, "Hey, I thought you were going to die." I get it. I'm a comedian myself. I know someone in my comments is going to jump the gun early every week, and they're gonna mess with me, or they're gonna,
Well, the funny thing about that is, and I don't want to sound like a dick, but when you do that, you have to know you're going to get about 75 just awful responses. I mean, some of those things I go, what is this person thinking? Like there's nothing is called like stick a finger on my bunghole, Joe. Doesn't even sound like the movie.
Not even
some great ones, but some of them are so bad. I go, how can you even like put this unless it's over as a joke, like, something like Mary Valeriano will put, or Jamie Keller will put this something stupid,
something ridiculously stupid.
But that's what's funny is I read some of these, I go, what are these people thinking? Like,
there's terrible. I love. There's Tony Kameen from the Marijuana Logs. He is angry that I'm doing it. He's like, this is beneath you. Do not do these adult film titles each week. He's angry every time I do them. And I know it's stupid, but there's still part of me. I love very super smart humor, but I also still love sophomoric stupid humor. And I remember going with a girl I was dating in college. And again, this is a time loss. You could find all this stuff aping movies now on a porn site, I'm sure. But there used to be, you'd go to a film rental place and there'd be a black curtain area at the back. And you'd go in, and at that point, it wouldn't just be a 5-minute thing you'd watch on, Pornhub or whatever. It was a full movie, and they would often ape it. And so they'd have, Harry Pooper and the Sorcerer's Stone or whatever. And I remember me and my girlfriend at the time laughing because there was one, it was for Regarding Henry. If you remember the Harrison Ford, Annette Bening. And the poster was Harrison Ford like this, looking straight. And then Annette Bening's face was coming in from the side, halfway over his. And there was a spoof, and her and I died laughing behind the curtain area. It was called Regarding Heine. And it was this guy's face, and then just a butt coming in from the side where Annette Bening. And it's so stupid, but again, it's funny.
Well, that funny thing you say about that black curtain, I lived in Burbank, and I was right near the corner of I was on Glen Oaks, and right near between Tahunga and Verdugo. And there was a 2020 video. And they had the adult section, and you'd always see like these middle-aged Armenian dudes coming out in sweatsuits with like a stack of 8 movies. And I'm like, how strong do you want your arm to be? Like 8 movies, but they had no shame. They just walked up, just put it on the counter, like, oh, you have a hairy butt freaks. Is it back yet? And it was a time that was different when people could go. And you would sit there and you would see people trying to sneak in there, So, okay.
They would try. There were people that had no shame. Other people would try and hide it. They put Star Wars on top, but the other 8 are all.
Well, it's like when you go into when you're younger, if you went into a store to get a condom, you'd hide it, but later, you'd be like, I'm getting laid. Give me the condoms. I'm getting laid. Holding up in CVS. I'm getting laid. Give me the mic. So comedy, you're on the cruise ships, but you still do a lot of road work, right?
Yeah, I do a lot of road work. I do a bunch in California, still work a bunch of clubs. I'm going to Canada. I usually spend anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks up there every year. Back in the Midwest where I grew up. Little by little, I think the comedy clubs are shrinking to the the numbers game of clubs used to just book people they thought, oh, this guy's great. And I'm surprised it didn't happen earlier. I'm not blaming the clubs for this, but it's become can you put butts in seats? So there's less and less clubs, and it's become more influencer kind of run, where sometimes it's not even comedians. It's just someone who has the million followers and the 8 likes they'll book them for a week instead of a comedian. So but I would say it's, half and half, right now, but I love it. There used to be a kind of a both a road comic and a cruise comic, but I love doing both. It's a lot of fun, and the cruises especially have kind of changed over the years. There's so many funny people, guys I look up to, who are out doing cruises now. So, and they have comedy clubs on it, so it's a different thing. It's not like it used to be,
I was going to say that because, it has changed. Because it used to be, the old term was a boat act. Someone's a boat act,
yes.
But they could be someone doing impressions and juggling and all that crap. But you're right, it has changed.
Almost
so many people, now a lot of comics still, because it's the only place where you're going to make any money. I mean, like, compared to the clubs used to pay.
Yes, there's a comic, James Uloff, Canadian. He lives in LA, but he's Canadian. He says cruises used to be where comics would go to die. Now it's where they go to join the middle class. I think there's a truth to that. Yeah.
So anyway, now I want to thank you for coming on here. How can people get in touch with you? Your dry bar. What's your dry bar comedy special called? That came out a little while ago, right?
Yes, I think it came out probably just before the pandemic. It's called Humble Brag. It's on Dry Bar. You could check that. YouTube, you can see my Letterman appearances, other late night appearances as well. All that stuff, specials. I recorded a brand new all clean CD 2 years ago that's out there, just called Mazan, like the phonetic spelling of my name. There's lots of, if you want to check out my comedy, lots of stuff out there.
So people, go Google Steve Mazan, Mazan. Also, go find his podcast. Go find Mazan Movie Club, and you find him on 16 Candles, and I'm on it. You go, holy shit, we heard him on this, and we heard him on Mazan Movie. And you should go to YouTube.
You can dig deeper and find the interview with you and Ken Wanatanabe.
Yeah, but that's a different site. We're going to get to that. I'm pickleball now. People. So also you can go to YouTube, look up Coops Comedy Corner. Or you'll go look up Comedy Trainwreck. That's Jimmy Corhan. He produces the show. He gives a lot of support to a lot of Philadelphia comedians. John Kensel has Kensel Culture. Ed McGonigal has a show. Corey Alexander, Coleman Green, and he's got a whole bunch of other works in the project. And you really got to follow Jimmy. Go follow Comedy Trainwreck. Go past my past episodes. Coops Comedy Corner. There's 25 of them. And I've had Rich Scheidner on. I've had my buddies from the show Homicide Live from the Street. We've had Wendy Lieben on. We've had Steve Scrovan. We've got some great guests. Also go to coopertalk.net. You can find 1,039 episodes there. I just posted Raphael Zabarge, big actor. He's been around forever. He was in Vision Quest. He was in a bunch of other stuff. He's a wonderful guy. And also, if you're on YouTube, look up Coop's the Coop Tank. That's my weekly business podcast. I moderate 3 business professionals from the South Jersey, Philadelphia area. We talk about motivation, goals, and stuff like that. No motivational speakers, Steve. It's just straight up bullshitting, and there's some really good, insightful stuff. But I'm not like, hey, listen to my show. But so people, check all my work out. I have April 26th. I'll be at Dave Evans Comedy Room right there at Pizzeria Uno, now Tony Roney and Maple Shade. On May 15th, the brand new Laurel at the Lanes. Steve Cooper presents Laurel's at the Lanes. Go to Splits Bar and Grill in Laurel Lanes in the luxury suite. We have a show going, and then of course my monthly show, Cork's Comedy Connections, at the Soundplex in Pensacola, and now next one will be Wednesday, May 21st. So anyway, thank you for listening. Please go check out Steve Mazan. Go find his movie. It's very inspirational. And I'm Steve Cooper. Thank you to Jimmy Corhan, and I'll talk to you people next time.
Coops Comedy Corner.